Joy there in Orlando, who's also joined by Sister Elida. Thank you guys so much for joining us today here on INC Radio Florida.
This is INCRadio, DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ, or Iglesianicristo.
To INC Radio South Central States. I'm your host, Arnie, and I am here in Fort Worth. We are not in studio today as we are all in different locations. And today our topic is going to be disaster stories from our different jobs. And so we're just really fortunate that we do have guests with us. And so we'll go ahead and have them introduce themselves.
Hello, I am Nathan Russell. I'm here in Dallas, Texas, and I guess I'd be in the D part of the DFW. Are you in Fort Worth?
I'm in Fort Worth, yes.
All right, so we're representing this entire Metroplex today.
Yes, and then hopefully we can have another guest who's going to be in another part of Texas, but not anywhere near Texas. So in the chat, I did drop in a question, and the question is, what are some of your on-the-job disaster stories? So if you have any stories of things that happened at work or while you were working, please don't hesitate to share it with us. And so, Nate, you've had like lots of jobs.
Yeah. And most of them were disasters.
Okay. Give us one. Give us your first one. What was like the one that had, like the worst disaster job you would think ever?
The worst ever. That's where we're going to start.
Yeah. Or do you want to start with a not so bad?
Where do you want to start? So, I mean, my very first job, I worked in a car customization shop when I was 14, which was probably illegal at the time. I didn't know. I also did construction work when I was in college. So which one you want to start with?
Let's do the one that's not so bad.
Not so bad. Okay,
Yeah.
Probably construction work. So I was a junior in college and I was taking summer classes, and my neighbor, he was a construction worker. He was a contractor, and he offered me a job to do construction work in Florida on the beach in the middle of summer for $8 an hour, which I thought was, oh, sweet, $8 an hour. That's a lot. Now that's like nothing, but back then that was quite a bit. And that was a very miserable job. And I think the worst job assignment that I got was having to install insulation underneath a beach house. So if you're not familiar what that is, some houses, they have a crawl space. You got to crawl underneath it. And, that's where all the spiders and the creepy crawlies live. And you have to install insulation. Well, insulation, it's the pink fiberglass stuff that looks like cotton candy. It doesn't taste like cotton candy, by the way. But you got to crawl underneath, and you have to staple it to the, what do you call it, to the wood that's underneath the house. And I guess this is like a prolonged disaster because it was like I was doing that for a solid week, installing those right before my classes. And the whole time, like, you got fiberglass falling on your face. And at first I would wear like glasses and I would cover up my face so I wouldn't get it. But being in, June, July in Florida with the humidity, is just too hot. And your glasses would fog up. So I had to do all this with fiberglass falling on my face without any glasses, any safety protection on my eyes or anything to get the job done. And then I would, call it quits and run the class and basically like sleep in class. So I was so tired after doing that. So that was probably like one of my first job disaster stories, was doing that. I only lasted a month doing that, if you can imagine.
So, I mean, I can see the heat part, but wait, how old were you when you were doing this job?
I would have been probably about 20, 21 at the time.
Oh, okay, so this is the legal one.
Yeah. Well, I don't, not like that. I filled out W-2s. I think I was paid under the table. So I got all $8 per hour. So I think we're past the statute of limitations for anyone that gets in trouble. So.
Now, but you did tell me about a job you had when you were much younger.
Yeah. So
Where,
after
like, should you even have been working?
after my freshman year in high school, my dad's friend had a car customization shop, and we were building speaker boxes out of fiberglass. So probably 14 years old at the time. And yeah, same deal. I never filled out a W-2 for that. If you're not familiar, W-2 is the form for, when you get employed and you do the taxes and all that. So I didn't even get paid for this job, though. I worked a whole month, in the Florida summer again, in a car garage, no air conditioning, around like heavy machinery. So having to cut boards with like a tabletop saw, which like a 14-year-old should have no business going anywhere near it without proper training. But really, no, let me just say, if you're 14 years old, you don't need to be anywhere near that thing, because it's dangerous. Like you're pushing the board through the saw that's coming out through the table. And if things aren't done right, that board can like jump around, like if it catches on the saw at all. So one disaster I had was like I had to use like a grinder, and my puny little 14-year-old arms don't have the strength to handle the torque of that grinder, and so I turn it on and it torques right out of my hand and lands on my leg. Gives me a nasty cut on the leg. So yeah, that was a pretty nasty story, nasty job that I had to do that only lasted a month, and then like I just refused to go back.
Well, first of all, I don't know if, you should have even been working at that time.
Yeah, well, that's how it is living in the South.
Um, I think I've been very lucky because I haven't had a lot of disasters on a job, but I do want to share a story where it was one of my coworkers. And so I work in the airline industry, and some of my workers work with aircrafts. And as if any of you have ever been on a plane, then you all know that we have bathrooms on the plane. And so one of the jobs that they had to do was dump the lab, is what we call it, the lavatory. They had to dump it, and so that when the plane goes out, then that means somebody else, it won't be full, because it can't be full. And so they have to connect a hose to the aircraft, and that big hose tube kind of thing is where everything dumps out into another truck. And if you don't connect it properly,
I see where this is going.
things tend to spill out. And so when they're new, they don't have much experience, because there's no way you could practice. You have to do it like, on the job. And so I felt bad because on his first try, he didn't get it there completely. And then so what happened was things fell on him.
Oh no. Oh no.
Now the bad part is when things fell on him, we don't have showers at some of the airports. And so we did have like hoses and so he had to kind of just like hose himself down, and it's not like he could go home. And so now a lot of my friends who work on the ramp know to have like extra clothes just in case. But when that had happened, I mean, like, I felt bad for him. And then, everyone was laughing because I guess that's something that happens to everybody when they first start off. But I just thought that was gross. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness I don't have to do that.
Yeah, I can't imagine that. I think it would top all the stories we could ever come up with today.
Okay, so like, did you ever like work food industry or any other thing where bad things just happened?
I
Or
did. So my first official job, legally official job, was at a sandwich shop, and I worked in the back kitchen, and that involved glazing hams with a blowtorch. So fresh out of high school, put a big blowtorch in my hand, and you sprinkle sugar on the ham, and then you caramelize it. So that was my job. But I also had to do all the cleanup and all that. So I kind of did everything in the back kitchen. Probably the worst story that I have out of that though is during the holiday season, which is the biggest, it's our busiest time of the year, and we came across this ham. I have to saw it. I had to saw the whole ham in half, and then that's how we put it. It's like we glaze it and then we put it back together. But when I sawed it open, there was a giant abscess on the inside of it, and it's just some kind of gnarly looking growth on the inside of the ham. And I remember cutting into it, and I was like, "What is that?" And I go and show my boss, and my boss is like, "Oh, we have to tear everything down right now." So, they have procedures to where when you discover things like that, like, for food preparation, if you're doing it properly, you tear everything down, you sanitize everything. And this is during the busiest time of the year. So it's like, we're trying to, up our production, but we have to tear everything down and redo everything. We had to bag it up and document everything. So that was a pretty bad, because it was really gross when you cut it open. You're like, what is this thing? What is this thing growing inside of it?
so you've never had like fires or anything happen while you're working like at the food industry or anything like that?
Well, in the hood that I worked with, the station, like the aluminum foil would regularly catch on fire. So, but not a big deal. You just start like slapping it, or I would extinguish it with like sugar. I would just dump sugar on it.
See, I've never had the privilege of working in the food industry. I was fortunate, like, even when I was younger, I would have either an office job or in the retail industry. So I did not really have a lot of disasters that happen. I think I've just been very
Yeah.
fortunate.
Food service is pretty tough because they got a lot of, especially if they're following all the standards. But you have to keep the place clean all the time. You have to sanitize everything. You get tested and inspected. Not the most fun job, but you will learn a lot. Like, you learn about food handling, safe food handling. You learn about food preparation and storage and all that. So even though it's not the most glamorous job, I would say that it's worth it to learn those skills, especially if you don't get to learn to cook, at home. Did you ever have a food service job?
No, never. I think because like all my high school friends had it, and they kept telling me how it was like not the greatest job they've ever had, but they needed it because that was the only job you could get in high school. So I never did it. And I think because back then, especially I guess when you work around too much oil or something, they used to get like a lot of acne. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
So like when you glaze hams, I know that the sugar gets everywhere, and at the end of the day, you would have sugar boogers that you'd have to blow out of your nose, and they're just crystallized sugar that get up into your nostrils.
And so besides those other ones, I think you were a teacher also.
Yes, I was a teacher. So after I
Now I know
graduated,
you have to have a lot of stories when it comes to teaching.
oh yeah, yeah. So I mean, just trying to become a teacher, um, in its own way, there was a disaster story where I was living in Florida at the time, and Texas has a program where if you have a college degree, even though it's not in education, you can teach that particular subject. So I had a math degree, and so I was trying to teach math, and so I had to drive to Houston, about 9 hours away, and take like these classes for a week, and then you have to take a test to prove your proficiency in math and whatnot. Long story short, though, to cut out all those other details, my car was like completely like dying at the time. I mean, the brake lines were not working right, so like sometimes the brakes would just lock up, you know. And I know my spark plugs went completely bad. The starter went bad, and I got stranded in Houston. So before I even, got the job, I was already having disasters. I did get the job in Houston though, and so the school that I worked at was like just built, like they just finished that year, and they were like, "Oh, I think we can finish this building a year early." And so they finished it a year early, and so it wasn't even like fully completed yet. So like there were still parts of the classroom that were missing, and with like schools, you would have like fights that would break out, things like that. There would also be like certain types of threats where the school would have to lock down. So one time we were doing an after school program, and that event like that happened. We had to evacuate the school. So we were all gathered outside, and we were all wanting to go home because it was a Saturday. We finished the Saturday program, but they had to bring in like elite police units to investigate. I'm trying to avoid certain words, but they had to investigate a device that was attached to the window of the school, and it turned out to just to be a science experiment. It was a thermometer that they attached to the side of the school, and we had to be evacuated and wait outside, in the Texas heat for like 3 hours while they cleared that up.
Oh, that is so cool. So before we continue, we do have another guest who has joined us, and I really do appreciate it because I know he's like out in the middle of the woods somewhere too. So you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, Sister Arnie. Hello, everyone over there in South Central States. This is Brother Justin tuning in here from San Antonio, Texas. And I don't know if you can see behind me, but we have some of our brethren who are currently having our CFO picnic and biking activity. We're just getting started, and we're out here in the great outdoors enjoying this activity.
Oh, how cool. So Justin, are you from San Antonio?
No, I was born and raised in Austin, Texas, but San Antonio is where I went to school for
Oh,
college
okay.
when I got my bachelor's.
Okay. So our topic is about disaster stories on the job, right? So do
Yes.
you have one story you could share with us?
Oh, wow. Where do I start? Um, so, okay. I had to get out of the way. So, okay. So there was this one time, right? When I was still working as a temporary employee, and the event that we had was a luncheon, right? And then I was just doing what my manager was telling me to do when the food was out. Like she was just telling me, Justin, give this to that back table. Justin, this tray goes to that third table. And then as I kept passing through, I just hear guests as I kept passing by them, they just kept snapping at me, kept clapping at me, and they're like, "Sir, we're over here," and I'm like, I know, I can see. There's enough food for everybody. I'm just doing what I'm told." But no matter what I said, they just keep snapping at me every time I keep going past them. And I'm like, "Yes, ma'am, you will get your plate. Just wait your turn. I'm doing this in a certain order as my manager is telling me to." And keep in mind, this is only my third week on the job.
Hey, at least it wasn't your first day.
It wasn't no, but there's a lot of firsts for everything.
Yeah. Oh, that is so cool. So let's go to our chat. Oh, and first of all, I just want to thank everyone who is on our live chat right now. We do have our folks from Baton Rouge and Fort Worth, Blue Ridge. But Melanie had shared something, and she was saying this isn't her disaster story, but it was another one of her real estate friends. And they encountered a questionable character during a showing, and they had to call the police because whoever they encountered refused to leave and said that that was their house. So I think that would have been like kind of weird. And then we have another one, Kenneth Owens, and I think Kenneth is from Baton Rouge, if I'm not mistaken. Kenneth, he just said, it reminds him of a plumber guy that he was watching clean out a sewer line and it got really nasty and he got frustrated and he wouldn't want to do it either. Yeah, I think those kinds of disgusting kind of things, I think that would deter me from a job, especially if I've seen all these other disasters. And then Kenneth had one more to share, and I think this one's pretty interesting. He was watching a window cleaner in Baton Rouge, 20 stories high. And one morning he looked up and the board was hanging on the side. So that means this guy was being held up by his safety belt. So that actually saved him. So I'm glad he was harnessed. So that's just a few of the stories. We'll come back to the other stories that our viewers are putting on the chat. But Nate, you must have some other stories from school besides that one.
I do. Well, I wanted to go back. I just remembered I used to work at a car wash. I did that for one summer in college. And I remember one time, because a certain number of the crew, they know how to drive a stick shift, okay, but not everybody did. And there was some customer's truck that came in, and they identified it as a stick shift. And so, like myself, I could drive stick, and then a few others could. So the truck comes out of the car wash bay, and one of the other workers gets in it, and then she drives the vehicle up to the drying bay, and we're like, wait a second, you don't know how to drive stick. Like, how did you get this thing into gear? She didn't know how to drive stick at all. So I felt bad for this guy's transmission because she probably just forced it in the first gear and then rolled it out. So we were kind of surprised. Also, there were like people's rims that got messed up. So like a really expensive German sports car showed up, and it's too low, had no business going into the thing, and it came out all scratched up. Another time, I smacked my head on one of the equipment, and it was like bleeding like crazy, and I had to. I said I was fine, just put a Band-Aid on it, but they wanted me to go to the emergency room. I went, and the worst part about this emergency room visit was the doctor looks at it and is like, "Yeah, I think it's okay." He removes my Band-Aid, and then he throws it away, and he inspects it and says it's okay, and he's like, "Yeah, so you need to get a Band-Aid for that and maybe take some, painkiller," and sent me on my way. And I'm like, dude, I'm here at the hospital. Give me a replacement Band-Aid. Like, what is this? You take mine off, and throw it away, and then tell me to go get another one. So,
So did he give you another? Did he give you another Band-Aid?
No, he sent me on my merry way with nothing. So
Okay.
I went right back to work and put a Band-Aid on from work. So, yeah.
That's not cool. Well, he probably would have charged you an arm and a leg for that Band-Aid anyway, so you better be grateful he didn't give you one.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, it's that workers' comp. So if you get injured on the job here, your employer is supposed to cover it, which he didn't want to, but he didn't have a choice.
Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits we have living here in the United States, because I don't know if other countries actually provide like workman's comp for their employees. So I think that's one of the benefits of being here. So I do have another story to share. Byron sent this in, and Byron is also out in Baton Rouge, I believe. And he says, when he was in Missouri for basic training, I'm assuming this would be military, for basic training, we were at the range and there was a tornado forming right above him. And he was told to go up against the hill and hold on to a tree. The closest tree to him was 2 feet tall, but luckily the tornado had stopped halfway down.
Wow. Yeah, that would have been scary. I think there was a few times when I was in Florida where we had to like shelter in place. At that time, we would, jump into the giant freezer. I think that was our safe place was the freezer, which funny enough, it's scary because like the freezer can lock from the outside, or uh, someone can accidentally turn the light off while you're in there. Funnily enough, though, we played a prank on one of the workers. It was her birthday, and so what we did was I hid in the freezer with the cake, and then our manager said, "Oh, I need you to get this from the freezer," and she would go and get it, and it was like surprise, and scare them. But I also had on that job, I also had to wear a pig suit and stand outside in the Florida summer, waving the sign.
A what suit?
It was a pig suit
Okay, so
because we did ham, so it was a pig suit.
oh,
Yeah,
hmm,
yeah. Not the greatest idea to do that in the middle of a Florida summer. Just here, put on this giant sweater and put on this giant fuzzy hat on and go stand outside and wave a sign.
yeah. I don't. I mean, like not even just in the Florida weather. I don't know if that's something I would actually do.
Every time a car would pass by, they were like, "Are you dying in there?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am."
So did you tell them since you're dying in there, you might as well go in and get some ham?
Yeah.
Right? That's a good marketing strategy.
Yep. Yeah. But as like going back to being a teacher, I remember I went to this new school that I applied to. Well, it was an old school, but it was new to me. And the first week there was no air conditioning. So just imagine, being in Houston, in August, which would be the hottest time of the year, with no air conditioning and having to teach all the classes, and like the power going out and this and that, like that was real miserable because at the same time had to put together like all the curriculum for two separate classes because this school didn't have like any curriculum to work with. So it's like you would work all night the night before putting together the curriculum, and then all day you had to suffer through the heat. So yeah, it took a while before I actually had a decent career in a climate controlled office.
Yeah, I was very picky when I would pick a job, and I wouldn't do the ones that would be outdoors because in Sacramento the summer can get really hot. And then also I wanted an office job. I didn't want something that would be not as pleasant. I do have a question for you. One of our listeners is asking if you have a picture of yourself in the pig suit.
Oh man, I don't think I do. My manager would, but I lost contact with her. Yeah, but I remember the feet of the pig suit. They were just so awkward. So you would just see like my tennis shoes. It wasn't even like a complete pig suit.
Yeah. I think one of the only jobs that I had that wasn't in an office was actually working retail. I worked for a very popular toy store that used to be around a long time ago. I don't know if it is still around now, but it was like one of my funnest jobs because, you're surrounded by toys and you can play with toys and stuff like that. And my manager really liked me. And so even though I was hired as a cashier, I think I only did a cashier for 1 week and that was it. And then after that, he got me up to what we call the tower. And up in the towers where they have the safe, where they keep all the money. And so at the end of the day, when the cashiers were done, they would have to count all their money and then put it like in envelopes and everything. And so what I had to do the next day was take all that money and physically count it like one by one. And back then, um, checks weren't really that popular, and debit cards and credit cards really weren't being used a lot. So a lot of it really was cash. So I was handling like millions of dollars in cash from the previous sales, especially when it came to the holiday season when everybody would be purchasing things. And so for me, it was fun. The only thing I really didn't like was because, you're handling money. And back then, we didn't worry about germs or anything. So you're just like counting by hand. And at the end of the day, you look at your hands and they're all dirty looking just from touching all the money and all the bills and all the coins. But it's not really a disaster. It just wasn't ideal, but at least it wasn't bad. And I think that's like probably the only job that I had that was not in the office or in in a controlled environment, but it was fun.
Yeah, I know that like after all these jobs when I was younger and after like teaching, in Houston, when I had like office jobs, and everything was done on the computer, I remember that I was like so much less stressed out no matter what compared to everybody else. Like, everyone's like panicking, and when there's quote unquote like fires that are set, in the corporate world, it just means like, oh, something messed up with like paperwork or whatever, and everyone's scrambling to get it fixed. And like, I would always be the calmest person there. And everyone's just like, how are you so calm? And I'm like, well, I taught in school for 7 years. So this is like nothing. There's not a physical fight breaking out. Somebody didn't grab a cologne bottle and then smash it. So there's broken glass everywhere. The whole room stinks of cologne and someone's bleeding. So I'm like, if it's just an Excel spreadsheet, I think I'm good.
What grade did you teach?
So I taught 10th grade geometry, and I also did 12th grade pre-calculus.
So which was the craziest of the two because of what like the kids did?
That would definitely be geometry. Oddly enough, the honors level, because it was the 9th graders. So typically teachers say like when you get 9th graders, they're like really hyperactive because they're still like kids. And so they come into high school and they're still acting like kids. So they can be real hyperactive. 10th grade, they start to mellow out. 12th grade, you have the whole senioritis. So they're like really chill. It's really easy to work with them. So yeah, it would be 9th grade. 9th grade would be the toughest. Every now and then you'd have like a 9th grader in a 10th grade class.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine all the different things that kids would do, but I bet you it was entertaining, right?
Oh yeah, there's so many stories I could tell. I remember one time a student in my class, she was complaining that she couldn't see the board because the room was too dark. And it's like, well, I'm running a projector. Like we have to turn the lights off. But you could tell that, by the tone of her voice and who she was just trying to be a punk in the class. She was like, oh, and I go up to her desk. I'm like, you can't see the board? She's like, no. And she had candy on her desk. So I go and I just grab it off her desk. And she's like, hey. I was like, well, you saw that. So you can see the board. And the whole class was like, oh. So, yeah, when it came to like high schoolers, you definitely have to be like on your A game and know how to always one up them and put them in their place.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. I think, like I said, I think being around the younger ones would be very entertaining because you never know what would happen or, what you could do. I mean, because I remember when I was in high school, I was a total nerd, but we still had to have fun. And so we found different ways to be fun without the teachers catching us. I remember in an American Lit class, we had a permanent substitute teacher because our teacher got sick. And so we had a permanent one, and she wasn't that interesting. Like we had a thick American Lit book, and she would make us read. Like that's all we did was read. We didn't have any discussions or anything like that. So the class ended up being boring. And then so to make it fun, I used to take rubber bands and then fold the pieces of paper, like you roll it so it's really small, and then it's kind of like
You
kind of
made
like a
hornet.
bullet, but not,
We called
not
them
really.
hornets.
Yeah. And then you take it, right? And you would fling it. And so I would do that. And like I said, it's an honors class. So everybody in there was smart and they're all about focusing, studying, right? And so I started that. And then after the guy next to me, he would do the same thing, right? And then so it would be both people on both sides of me. We would do it and no one could see because everyone's got their big textbook in front of them reading. And then people would get hit and then they don't know where it's coming from. And then one of them flew across the teacher. and, and she's trying to figure out like what's going on. And then, she's like, okay, who did it? Who, if you guys don't tell us who did it, the whole class is going to get punished. But we never ratted us out. And I would just feel bad because my friend on the left, who was like not the one who started it, he would always be the one to get in trouble because he was like the class clown. So they thought that he was the ringleader. They didn't know it was actually me.
See, I was the class clown in school, so you couldn't really get away with things with me. It was like, I already know all these things.
But yeah. So anyways, thank you so much for sharing your disasters and in your previous jobs. Like I said, I was fortunate. I didn't have a lot of disasters at my jobs. Well, I don't even remember any. And so, always thankful for that. But we are running out of time. Any last shout outs you'd like to give out before we go?
Yes, I'd like to shout out my wife and my son. Hopefully they don't have to ever, especially my son. Hopefully he never have to do the same jobs I have to do. He can rest assured I'm not going to put him in a car customization shop when he's 14.
See, and I think that's good that you have that experience. So that way, if he looks for jobs, you can kind of guide him,
Yeah.
and the way he can go. I do want to thank our listeners out there, our friends from Jacksonville, Arkansas, from Blue Ridge, from Baton Rouge, Fort Worth. We also have Jennifer, who is from Long Beach, California. Hello to all my California folks. And Fort Worth, like I said, Blue Ridge, Dallas. Thank you so much for always joining in. We will be back next week, same time, different place maybe, but same time, 9 o'clock next Saturday. And before we end, we always do want to say thank you to our CFO coordinator and SEBC president, Brother Angelo Irano Manalo, and to our executive minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo. That's it for today. Thank you and see you all next week.
This is INCRadio, DZEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ.